The topic relates to the 2018 theme, Conflict and Compromise, because Thoreau decided to not pay his taxes. Instead, he focused on how little he can get by with and focused on self-happiness and independence.
At the time, slavery was an issue around the nation, but nobody wanted to protest or take a stand. The majority of the citizens were too timid and afraid. They were also worried about the consequences they would eventually face. Henry David Thoreau, on the other hand, was careless about the laws and wasn't afraid to rebel. Thoreau was eager and urged others to take a nonviolent stand. There are thousands who are in opinion opposed to slavery and to end the war, who yet in effect do nothing to put an end to them. Henry David Thoreau, Civil Disobedience.
Thoreau was an active abolitionist and is recognized for the most famous short work in literature, which is Civil Disobedience. Henry David Thoreau was born on July 12, 1817, in Concord, Massachusetts, to John and Cynthia Thoreau. At a young age, Thoreau was involved in various activities with nature. He attended public school, and at the age of 16, he was set for Harvard. After he graduated Harvard, he became a teacher and later wrote about political subjects and gave lectures. Thoreau knew the United States government was still new and fragile, and believed strongly that this new government depended on responsible citizens. Thoreau considered a responsible citizen to be one who was informed and questioned government laws. During the 19th century, it was common to discuss and debate issues of the day in public. Most towns had a public forum called the Lyceum, where citizens were allowed to lecture. Thoreau did this often and encouraged others to live deliberately and thoughtfully. One aspect of living deliberately meant to always ask oneself, is this government law reasonable and moral? Thoreau was a firm and active abolitionist. He despised the evils of slavery. By the 1830s, Northerners believed slavery to be an injustice to God himself. An abolitionist newspaper called The Liberator and argued that slavery must be stopped, and citizens must awaken before being condemned by God forever. Thoreau said, I could not for an instant recognize that political organization as my government, which is the government of slaves also. Thoreau argued and believed firmly that citizens needed to not only speak about the evils of slavery, but take action and actually do something. Another source of conflict with his government for Thoreau was President James K. Polk and his Mexican-American War of 1849. Thoreau viewed Polk as a bully who won the presidency on a platform Thoreau did not agree with. Polk believed in the manifest destiny, or the idea that the United States was destined by God to expand its territory from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. President Polk was determined to accomplish this by any means necessary. Thoreau disagreed and gave lectures in opposition to the Mexican-American War and the violence it stood for. Henry believed this war sponsored violence and was in violation of his personal conscience, and also the ethical conscience of the larger community. Thoreau could not support a government which enslaves men, shoots Mexicans, and robs Indians of their land. He is quoted as saying, If I have unjustly wrested a plank from a drowning man, I must restore it to him, though I drown myself.
In July of 1848, Henry David Thoreau was stopped by an officer named Sam Staples. He asked Thoreau why he hadn't paid his poll tax and even offered to pay it for him. Thoreau refused on the grounds that the money would go to support government policies that conflicted with Thoreau's conscience. For example, the poll tax would support the fugitive slave laws passed by Congress, punishing anyone who tried to harbor runaway slaves. He also didn't want to support the Mexican-American War because he believed that America had no business fighting. Thoreau was tired of people talking about the evils of government policies and wanted to take action. The rights and duties of the individual in relation to the state. This document was later renamed Civil Disobedience. Though Thoreau never used the term civil disobedience, it is a concept definitely associated with him. Civil disobedience is defined as nonviolent opposition to a government law or policy on the grounds of conscience. Thoreau's essay, Civil Disobedience, has become one of the most famous short works in American literature. It has been published in many languages and is studied as curriculum in many schools.
Thoreau's ideas and protests seem very positive and clever today, but actually you may be shocked to hear that for most of his life, Thoreau's work and ideas were mainly ignored. Thoreau was the first American to use civil disobedience as a means of protest. Since then, many other Americans emphasized civil disobedience. The most famous case was Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King protested the rights of African Americans in the mid-1900s. King first read Thoreau's civil disobedience essay while in college. Martin Luther King used Thoreau's concept of civil disobedience to protest unjust laws of segregation in the 19th century. During one of his many acts of civil disobedience, King was put into jail and wrote his famous Letter from a Birmingham Jail. A quote from this letter states, "There are two types of laws, just and unjust. I would be the first to advocate obeying just laws. Conversely, one has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws." King encouraged peaceful demonstrations and nonviolent law-breaking acts. He knew nonviolent civil disobedience was powerful and necessary to change evil, sinful laws. There are also many non-Americans that have made civil disobedience prominent. For example, anti-Nazis and Vietnam War protesters strongly believed in a nonviolent protesting. A more popular instance is when Gandhi used civil disobedience almost 60 years after Thoreau had. Gandhi was from India and was a strong supporter of peace. Just as Thoreau had, Gandhi was put into jail for protesting. While in jail, Gandhi read Civil Disobedience. The essay inspired Gandhi to not give up. Gandhi himself even said that Thoreau was greatly influenced with the protests.
Thoreau's famous work, Civil Disobedience, calls for citizens to follow the higher law of their conscience when government action is immoral. Henry David Thoreau has influenced the way the world opposes injustice. Civil disobedience is used today throughout the world. Governments have made wrong, immoral decisions in the past and will continue to do so in the future. It is up to the citizens and individuals to have the courage to stand up against the laws that are unethical and resist when laws conflict with what they believe is right.